This rum is really quite something. Now, I've made jokes for many, many years about how Luca has always managed to push Velier to the next level by making some really very powerful rums. And there's no question that there's all sorts of other independent bottlers that do the same thing. For example, I think it was Rum Deluxe out of Denmark. They produced a Dominican Republic rum, or that was like 93.6% or something like that. And of course, Marienburg out of Suriname did one that was 90%. I have a feeling they're trying to grab for the crown, though. You just don't get these really strong rums because who the fuck is going to drink them, right? Nobody really wants these things. They are hard to mix. They have to be diluted down to something more manageable, and to drink them neat is just ridiculous. But I have made the point before, I'm just going to put this here. I have made the point before that I like rums on the edges, on the margins. Like most rums on a bell curve, right, are going to be like marginal to most people, or they're going to be really good for most people. But then there's that middle thing, which is where most blends and rums that sell gangbusters are, the Eldorados or the Hamptons or the St. Lucian rums or the Barbadians and so on. They all inhabit that relatively good middle part of the curve. But I like stuff at the edges because they're the ones that make me think. El Destilado's white rums from Oaxaca, for example, or Uruapan from there as well. Those are rums that I like. Or the rums from Cabo Verde, the Groves. Even some of the Indian village level rums are very interesting in that way, even though we never really trust them 100%. And of course, there's stuff from Japan, there's stuff from Australia, Indonesia, like the Batavia, Iraq, and so on. They are interesting because they show something of the diversity of rum. What they don't do, though, is they don't often go off the reservation and give you something really hot, something very literally off the still. And that brings me once again to this rum. All right, what are the specs? Well, first of all, L'Esprit is a little company out of Brittany in France that is actually something of a whiskey bottler, independent whiskey bottler that dabbles in rums some time. It's run by a friend of mine called Tristan Prudhomme, who I've met several times and whose rums I've always liked, and I've reviewed quite a few of them. This is a Guyanese rum. They say Diamond Distillery on the label, but if you look really closely at the bottom side of it, it says MPM, which makes it a Port Morant. This was made in 2017 and was left to rest, not age, rest in steel tanks until October of 2018 when it was bottled at 85%. So essentially, it's not aged at all. It's an unaged Port Morant rum, and this is the kind of thing we don't see very often. And when we do, it's usually down to like 46, 48%, 50 if you're lucky. 85? Yeah, we just don't go there, The other thing I wanted to mention, of course, is that we know the Guyanese stills very well now. It wasn't the case back as little as 10 years ago, but we know that Port Morant is a double retort wooden pot still. It is housed at Diamond Estate in Guyana, and it was kind of like moved around in the 70s and 80s before it finally found its resting place in Diamond Estate, and then, which is where all the stills currently are in Guyana, right? There is really only one distillery, but it has like 13 stills. Right, what else can I tell you about it? Well, pot still 85%, unaged or rested for, about a year. Oh, this is the second edition. There is actually a first edition, same specs, so 2017 to 2018 rested and then issued. And I thought that one was somehow slightly better. I have no idea why. As I recall, Tristan issued these rums at still strength to commemorate the birth of his son Edgar in 2017, which is an anecdote I just like passing along because I like the guy and I wanted to give him some, headspace. Let's try it. Let's see what it's all about. All right, so. Man, this encourages adverbial density. I mean, it just takes your vocabulary out for a stroll, doesn't it? Something like this. Man, the smell is absolutely phenomenal. It is very hot, very spicy. It's a bit sharp. There's no question about that at all. You take a really tiny sip, otherwise it'll just burn your lips, and don't fart and drink it. Otherwise you might spontaneously combust the entire bar in which you are. The thing is, all right, so it has salt, rubber, it has some wax or floor polish, that kind of thing. These are the standard kind of notes you have from unaged rums, whether they're agricoles or molasses-based rums. But in this case, you're absolutely getting all of that. But you're also getting dates and figs and olives and brine. That's also a characteristic of this kind of thing, and that won't be to everybody's taste. It is to mine, because I tend to like stuff that goes off the bleeding edge, which this does. Yeah, but even the cigarette smoke and the ashiness to it, or the mineral notes, the iodine and the sulfur that you might kind of like, notice after a little while, all that goes away. Then what you start to have is just a parade of fruits, and it's guavas, it's lychees, it's mangoes, slightly ripe. There is a little bit of very dark red cherries. There's a certain sweetness to it that I liked. And overall, this thing is really quite an impressive nose for something that is unaged at this strength. It's brilliant. All right, so like I said, you've really got to be careful with this. You get most of the same things once again, right? There's a whole lot of wax and crayons, and there's a little bit of rotted meat on top of all of that. That is the hogo they sometimes talk about. So there's a little bit of salt and brine and olives and the more dialed down fruits like dates and figs are there. There's a little bit of herbaceousness to the whole exercise. A little bit of licorice, red licorice in particular, a slight bit of candy. Those are probably the whatever esters happen to pass through that are still available to you. And if I had to press myself, a little bit of marzipan, just a little bit, and perhaps, just perhaps, a tiny bit of citrus, not a whole lot. So one of the things you'll notice that I haven't really talked very much about the wooden notes of Port Morant, that are things that I like in their aged versions. There's very little of that here. You are not getting any of that. But I'd argue that that's simply a function of the fact that this isn't aged at all. It is a hugely powerful piece of work. It really bludgeons you around the head a bit. And I would also argue that if you can still find it, that you're going to have to dial it down. I mean, I can't, unless you're a cocktail mixer and you put this into some kind of really nice, like a daiquiri or a mojito or something like that. I'm no expert in this kind of thing. I suspect that it's going to appeal to the aficionados who want to see where something very strong from Port Morant, where we mostly see only aged rums come. They're going to want to talk about that, and they're going to want to try it for that reason. Whether they share it the way I do, or whether they want to take it further and start to experiment with it in some fashion, is entirely, well, their thing, right? All right, so evaluation. I did say it's sharp, it's hot. There's no two ways around that. You know, you have to kind of like make your peace with that kind of thing. But I think it's actually more of an educational rum than it is the sort of thing that you want to hand out to your friends when they pass by your house on a Saturday afternoon when you're watching the game. Because connoisseurs will like it for what it is as an educational tool. What is Port Morant like when it comes straight off the still? And it sheds a little bit more light on all the different fascinating varieties of rums that we can find. And if it is a bit too hot, well, yeah, that is just what it is. And I don't know if it's still available, to be quite honest with you. Esprit is actually one of these niche players in the independent rum world. They don't make waves the same way that, Rum Deluxe or 1423 does in Denmark, or some of the other players in Germany or France do. They just seem to keep a low profile, which is to our detriment, I sometimes think. I like their rums a lot. I have really almost never found a dog in their entire lineup, which is to their credit, I think. Although they just don't go on the circuit very often. I think they just concentrate on their whiskeys more than anything else. All right, so that's the rum. My evaluation of this, oddly enough, was 85 points. I still think that's a pretty good score for it, and that's where I'm going to leave it. It was what I scored it at back in the day. And the first edition, which perhaps had that element of surprise to it, but has pretty much the same specs, 85% unaged white Port Morant. I have a feeling that it may have been my surprise and delight at finding something like this that made me score it with an excess of enthusiasm, perhaps at 88. But you can't go wrong between those two numbers. If you like this kind of thing, then 88 might be just where you want to go. And if this is the sort of thing that just doesn't turn your crank at all, and you just don't like this kind of unaged molasses-based rum from Guyana, then perhaps 85 might be better, or even lower for that matter. Personally, I think it's great, and it, as I say, as an educational tool to tell us what the rums we love are like before they come out of baby clothes, here's something really nice for you. And that's it for today. I will leave it here, and if you have any comments on this or any other rum that I'm talking about, by all means leave me a comment. Otherwise, have a really nice day, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.